What would you do if you ever reached the end of the world?
So why does Alexander the Great continue to captivate our imagination and spark such heated discussions today? I understand how Alexander and his kingdom's name can be a big deal for some people nowadays. For me, it's not an issue of pride. I'm not proud that he was from my country. The point is, he either was Greek or he wasn't. So it's about the truth. And the truth is that he was Greek. It is absolutely okay to not have ancient history. It doesn't matter whether you have it or not. But obviously, for certain countries, it's such a big deal to have ancient connections. And when they don't have them, they make them up. And this is what happened in this very peculiar and sad case of the so called North Macedonia, which might be unique in human history. A newly founded state tries to appropriate someone else's name, history, and identity. Not only the name, also history and identity. And it's not the same like Bulgaria, for example, who's claiming the unclaimed ancient Thracian people, although northeastern Greece is called Thrace, by the way. This is very different. I hate to say that when you visit certain countries such as Albania, Bulgaria, Turkey, or fake Macedonia, you need to be careful with the information that is provided either there or online. For example, a lot of the cruise ships do Italy, Greece, and Turkey to visit Constantinople or Ephesus in Turkey. And I know for a fact that most tourists that go to the ancient Greek city of Ephesus, they don't hear anything about the Greeks, although the Greek language is all over the place. By hiding the truth, though, the Turks are practically misleading the tourists. By the way, I've made an episode about the Greek cities that are now part of Turkey, and you can find it in this episode's description. Obviously, names change over time. Out of all of these countries that we're mentioning, the only ones that are still called the same since antiquity are India, Egypt, and Greece. So always be careful when, for example, you watch a documentary and they just mention names of modern countries, because this gives the impression that those names would have been used even back then. That's why I'm saying that. Arrian was a Greek historian, military commander, and philosopher. He lived in the 1st century AD. He is best known for his work Anavasis of Alexander, a detailed account of the campaigns of Alexander. He wrote about him. He was different. There was no one like him, and when he died, the world was poorer. It is true that any country would want to have such figures in its history because it makes for a glorious past. And a glorious past gives you value today. That's the idea, anyway. And I guess that's why this small Slavic nation above Greece, with no distinct identity amongst the other Slavic people, dreamed big by choosing the most famous Greek of all times, and probably the most famous person from antiquity in general. The madness is that they succeeded. It seems, after all, that anything really is possible. The only impossible thing is for me to play in Hollywood. So speaking of Hollywood, let's mention some of Alexander's depictions to see if he is still present in the media. Now you can see why I made the reference to Hollywood. I'm not just crazy. Obviously, I'm hoping that someone might be listening and might want to cast me in something in Hollywood, but okay, that's a different story. The first movie about him actually was made in India, as well as the third one. The first one from 1941 was titled Sikandar. So in World War II, India was making a movie about Alexander the Great. The other one was in 1965. Both focus on the meeting of the Greek king and the Indian king, Porus. By the way, Sikandar or Iskandar, we have mentioned, were variations of Alexander's name in the East. From Ale Iskandar comes the name of the city Alexandria in Arabic. Iskandariya, Al Iskandariya. We just heard part of a song by Stamatis Spanoudakis, a Greek composer who made a great album about Alexander some 30 years ago. His song was sampled by hip-hop artists, and we heard it on a different episode. The second film was the 1956 film by Robert Rawson with Richard Burton as Alexander. The film was a box office disappointment. It received bad reviews, and even Richard Burton, who was a great actor, was not really praised for this performance. And finally, the 2004 film by Baz Luhrmann with Nicole Kidman as Olympias and Leonardo DiCaprio as Alexander. Oh wait, no. That never happened. What did happen was the Oliver Stone film, and that's why Luhrmann didn't go through with his. But isn't this impressive? Only 4 movies about Alexander the Great. The 2004 movie starred Colin Farrell as Alexander, Angelina Jolie as Olympias, Val Kilmer as Philip, Jared Leto as Hephaestion, Rosario Dawson as Roxana, and Anthony Hopkins as Ptolemy. We've mentioned them at some point during the famous Macedonians episodes. In this film, we hear the name Sikandar a lot when he goes to Persia. Against a budget of 155 million, this ambitious production only made about 167. One of the most significant controversies surrounding this film was the portrayal of Alexander's sexuality. The film really emphasizes the sexual relationship between Hephaestion and Alexander.
They're everything I care for. And by the sweet breath of Aphrodite, I'm so jealous of losing you to this world you want so badly.
You'll never lose me, Hephaestion.
It even included scenes that showed a sexual relationship with Varoas, the Persian eunuch, although, as we've said, no historian explicitly mentions any of those things. If anything, it's the Roman Curtius that highlights their relationship with Varoas, which means a historian that practically didn't know anything about all of this that had happened even like 400 years before his time. Another point, as I've mentioned, was the age differences between the actors and the historical figures that they played. Some critics felt that Kilmer's performance didn't really capture the grandeur and the tragic aspects of Philip's character. But I think the depiction of Philip himself wasn't really praised, and I'm afraid that that also affected how Kilmer's performance was received. As I've already said, I do think that he nailed it. For me, it felt like a potential nomination. The film, nevertheless, didn't receive any nominations in any awards. Okay, not the major awards that people want to be nominated in. It was nominated at the Golden Raspberry Awards in 6 categories: Picture, Actor, Actress, Director, Supporting Actor for Kilmer, and Worst Screenplay. At the Stinker's Bad Movie Awards, it received 9 nominations for really imaginative categories. All the above, plus a nomination for Rosario Dawson. It also had least special effects. It's a funny category. Most intrusive musical score, and a double nomination for worst female fake accent, both for Angelina Jolie and Rosario Dawson. Most wins that year, nevertheless, went to Catwoman. Alexander won for most intrusive musical score. I totally disagree. The music of Vangelis in general is always good, and this score actually was good as well. And by the way, Vangelis was the only Greek person to be involved in the entire film. Alexander also won for worst female fake accent, and I think this was well deserved. It was Angelina Jolie. In Greece, or in Western Greece, where Olympias was from, we don't speak with a Russian accent. I'm really sorry, Angelina. Despite this, Jolie's performance was one of the film's highlights. Angelina, if you're listening by any chance, I love you, and I loved your Maria Callas performance, which was just a few months ago for me. It was in 2024. I had said in another episode that you would probably win the Oscar in 2025. For some crazy reason, you were not even nominated. That same year, by the way, Brad Pitt was nominated in the same category again for a Greek-themed movie, Troy. What a coincidence. So, although Farrell was also criticized for his performance, for me, he had the necessary passion and conveyed the complexity of such character. He himself has expressed his dislike for his portrayal, and he said that the role was a very difficult challenge. In 2017, India strikes again with a very impressive series that cost over $60 million. It had almost 300, this is a staggering number, 300 20-minute episodes, and it was called Porous. So obviously the main focus again was the Indian king that fought with Alexander. They're obsessed with that king. It's really funny. He was defeated by Alexander. It was the most expensive show on Indian television and very fitting for the likes of a Greek and an Indian king especially. In 2024 now, and my favorite part is coming up. Netflix also made a documentary about Alexander. And of course, only 8 minutes in, the show throws in the gay relationship with Hephaestion. No matter how much anyone wants or doesn't want this to have been true, it's just not mentioned by anyone. If anything, Plutarch mentions this incident that a man had two boys of surpassing beauty to sell and inquired whether Alexander would buy them. Alexander was incensed and cried out many times to his friends, asking them what shameful thing Philoxenus had ever seen in him that he should spend his time in making such disgraceful proposals. And then the word Macedon. Seriously, historians using the word Macedon because they think they're being accurate is at least silly. But to even have Alexander call his kingdom Macedon is hilarious. We don't even have different words for this kingdom in the region in Greek, as I've mentioned in the first episode. Why on earth should there be a distinction in English? I don't get it. And I'm sure no one called him Alex, and he didn't call Hephaestion Heth. That was really funny. And what is up with all these shows that have no Greek historians? At least in this one, there was one archaeologist who's excavating in Alexandria, and she's in every documentary, by the way. But there was no historian speaking. It's one of the few shows also to focus a lot on the Persians. Usually that doesn't happen. And there were even two Persian historians talking about the Persians, plus one that specializes in them. I also thought it was a bit weird how a 6-episode show spends 5 episodes on merely the first 3-4 years of a decade-long campaign. These happen to be the years when King Darius was still around. The series might as well have been titled Alexander and Darius, but this is supposed to be the story of Alexander, or maybe it isn't. So I guess that there should be a season 2, but I guess maybe not. There's also a line in the show where practically they say that the previous Persian invasion in Greece doesn't really matter and the king should be judged only for his other works. I'd love to hear that line in the next Netflix docudrama about Hitler. Please, I'm dying for a Netflix docudrama about Hitler. Out of all the actors, there was actually one Greek, yay, who nevertheless played the Persian queen. Okay, I picked up on the Greek accent, so I instantly looked her up. Her name is Arne Tsangaredou, which means we have common descent, and I can judge by the ending of the surname, but she's called Agnes Scott in the show. And we gotta give to them the fact that they even use some Greek words here and there, like when Olympias calls Alexander and she calls him Agapimou, which means my love. This Netflix docudrama, by the way, has a 5.5 out of 10 rating, and when we get to the Cleopatra episodes, you'll see that this is actually a very good rating. And also what we can make out of all of this is that blonde was not a good color, neither for Richard Burton nor for Colin Farrell. I don't know about you guys, but I didn't like it. I'm not really sure what the point of casting a dark haired actor is and then dyeing their hair blonde. Because all of them are dark haired, including Buck Braithwaite, who played the Netflix Alexander. But what about the real Alexander's hair? And now that's why I'm talking about this. Both his parents had dark hair and they were Greek. The Greeks are generally known for their dark hair and eyes. What does ancient art suggest, though? We have the painting from Philip's tomb in Greece, which I saw recently, and the Alexander mosaic from Pompeii, which was made after a Greek original. They both depict Alexander with dark or at best brownish hair, but not blonde. Nevertheless, a bust of his in the Acropolis Museum in Athens shows that maybe there might have been some golden hues on his hair, but not entirely blonde hair. I'm only mentioning this because I'm really surprised with the certainty of his depictions in film and TV, and they always show the blonde hair. Speaking of his bust in the wonderful Acropolis Museum, there's more. In Athens, we have two more, one in the National Archaeological Museum and one in the Kanellopoulos Museum. We usually pass by this when we finish the Acropolis and we go into Plaka, the old town. In other parts of Greece, there's busts of him in Olympia, Pella, Thassos, and Lemessos, or Limassol in English, which is in Cyprus. Outside of Greece, there's busts of him in Alexandria, in Egypt, and there should be, of course, in Berlin, Munich, Louvre,
Brussels, Copenhagen, Seville, Boston, and Damascus.
I don't know how on earth all of them got all these busts, but okay, that's a different story. Out of all of them, because I tried to find all of them online, I think that objectively, the Acropolis Museum one is the best one by far. And it's thought to be an original from the 4th century BC, which means the man himself saw it and approved it. So how do we know all this stuff that I've been telling you? Here are the main writers who are the sources. Some of his contemporaries. Kallisthenes from Olynthos. He was the visual historian of Alexander's campaign and a nephew of Aristotle himself. Although he flattered Alexander with his descriptions, at some point Alexander executed him. By 327, Alexander had several men executed, including Clytus, that had even saved his life. Some of them had actually plotted against him, against Alexander, so he wasn't mad. Keep in mind that kings in many places in antiquity were usually murdered, so rightfully Alexander couldn't trust anyone. The action's okay, that's a different thing, but he couldn't trust anyone. Obviously, with too much power came insecurity, and in the end, this huge burden got the best of him. It is also said that he drank too much. He was like any one of us, just a normal, flawed person with a lot of responsibility. I can't even imagine what it must be like to be 22, 24, 25 years old and have all these problems in your head. We also have Ptolemy the First, the Sotir, the savior, who was a general with Alexander and later became the king of Egypt, and he founded the dynasty of Cleopatra. We have Aristobulus, he was an engineer and architect who was with Alexander. Nearchos, who was the admiral of Alexander's fleet. We have some later sources, such as Arrian from the 2nd century AD, Plutarch, who wrote Life of Alexander, again in the 2nd century AD, and we mention him quite a lot. We have Diodorus Siculus from the 1st century BC, and also we have Strabo, who wrote the Geography, again from the 1st century BC. And then at least 2 Roman historians. Okay, whatever, I'm going to mention their names anyway. Quintus Curtius Rufus, who wrote History of Alexander in the 1st century AD, and probably one of the least reliable. And then we have Marcus Junianus Justinus. Those people just loved long names. He wrote the Epitome in the 2nd and 3rd century AD. To most of us, this might sound like antiquity, the 2nd or 3rd century AD, but it's already 600 years after Alexander. Out of all of them, Arrian is often seen as the most reliable source due to his reliance on Ptolemy and Aristobulus. Plutarch provides valuable insights into Alexander's character and anecdotes, but is less reliable for military details. And some of them also provided the information that we have about the successors, Viadochi, as we say in Greek. They were the generals of Alexander the Great who fought for control of his empire after his death in 323 BC. When he died, he might have left a will, but probably those dudes who had actually built the empire wouldn't want to leave it in the hands of some half-Greek, half-Persian child. But didn't Alexander have any brother that could take the throne? Of course he did. Arideus. After 6 years, Olympias, Alexander's mother, had Arideus and his wife executed. We're not done. This is to be continued in the next episode, so stay tuned. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and share. Until next time, this is Onoufiros Dovletis signing off from Not Another Greek History Podcast.